And maybe you've tried to let it go, but letting go just ain't never easy to do. And maybe you feel you'll end up with another broken heart, trying to face something that seems way too hard. But it's too hard to hold on to all of the pain. And it's too hard to relive it over and over again. It's too hard when the memories have control over you. Some say it's too hard to forgive. I say it's too hard not to. It's too hard not to. It's too hard not to. Maybe you're trying to handle losing someone that you thought would be there. And maybe you're feeling anxious, 'cause it left you lonely, confused, and so scared. And maybe you feel you'll end up with another broken heart, trying to face something that seems way too hard. But it's too hard to hold on to all of the pain. And it's too hard to relive it over and over again. It's too hard when the memories have control over you. Some say it's too hard to forgive. I say it's too hard not to. It's too hard not to. It's too hard. Something so senseless and something so selfish, trying to come and tear your world apart. But someone so loving and someone so selfless will help you when you're ready to restart. It's too hard to hold on to all of the pain. And it's too hard to relive it over and over again. It's too hard when the memories have control over you. Some say it's too hard to forgive. I say it's too hard not to. It's too hard not to. I say it's too hard not to. It's too hard not to. It's too hard not to forgive. Lord, help me to forgive, because it's too hard not to.
All right. Welcome everyone to Trauma, Pain, and Relationships Part 1, a virtual conversation on mental health. I am your moderator on tonight, Candace Wrights, author, speaker, mental health advocate. And on tonight, we are going to unpack so much. So we just pray that on tonight that you, not only that you will be informed and educated, that you will walk away feeling inspired and encouraged in your relationships, in your friendships. So on tonight, I'm going to turn it over to our beautiful host, Dr. Cook and Lori, and let them welcome you.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
We're excited to be here once again on a Saturday night to deal with some really important topics around relationships. And in the midst of this pandemic, we know that there's trauma and there's pain. in our intimate relationships because of the stressors that we're facing in this pandemic. And, we have talked about domestic partner violence. And because the atmosphere is right, people are stressed, people are at home, kids are at home, people are struggling financially, struggling with trying to get food. So this creates a perfect storm for intimate partner violence. So that's why we thought that it would be important to highlight and unpack some of the issues surrounding relationships. What about?
Yes. Rosemary, I totally agree. And not only um, will we talk about how COVID has affected, but just in general, because I know for me, dealing with mental health issues have affected my intimate relationships throughout my lifetime. And there's so much that I don't understand still at this point. And so I'm a student tonight. I am looking forward to learning and growing along with the audience. And I'm excited to what you and Dr. Massey and Dr. Gilliam, I call y'all Donna and Jamel, will have to share. And I'm going to sit back and leave it up to you all. And if anybody on this live have any questions, be sure to type questions in, because it's not just a conversation with us. It is a conversation with us all. So please put your comments in, and so that we can get the help that we need.
Yes. So, Dr. Cook, can you open us up with a word of prayer?
Yes, let us pray. God, we thank you for this awesome opportunity that you have given us, God, to just shed some light on relationships. God, we ask you right now, God, to just touch each and every one's heart, God, those who will be presenting, those who will be receiving. God, let your Holy Spirit just go from where we are, God, into the homes of those who are listening, that they might receive information that will help them to heal, that will help them to have healthier relationships, that will help their relationships to move not just from from surviving, God, but let relationships thrive, God, because when we know better, we do better. So we ask all these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen and
Amen.
amen.
Amen. Amen. So, Dr. Cook, I am going to pull up your slides right now and let you just start us off. Is that okay?
Sure. All
All
right.
right.
So just to start off with a statistic, 1 in 4 women experience intimate partner violence, and 1 in 10 men experience intimate partner violence. So we want to talk about healthy relationships and what a healthy relationship will look like, and how does a healthy relationship become unhealthy. So what are some of the patterns of behaviors, some of the things that we have learned that we are uh, recreating in our adult relationships. The next slide. So the definition of an intimate relationship is an interpersonal relationship that involves physical or emotional intimacy. But it can also be non-sexual. It can be relationships with friends, family, or acquaintances. Next slide. So we want to know, what does a healthy relationship look like? Next slide. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So a healthy relationship first includes knowledge, sharing knowledge, talking about your dreams, your fears, your goals, and your past. A healthy relationship is one that involves care and concern for each other's well being. In a healthy relationship, you will be able to give and receive comfort, and you will be able to keep each other from harm, whether it's physical, emotional, or verbal. A healthy relationship involves trust. That is, you have confidence that your partner, your friend, is going to be honest with you. that he or she will behave in a way that's honorable, that they're going to be fair and not cause you purposeful harm. Every now and then we will hurt one another, but the goal is not that we intentionally inflict harm on one another, whether it's emotional, psychological, or spiritual. A healthy relationship includes responsiveness. That means understanding and supporting one another, recognizing one another's needs during times of pain, but also being able to celebrate one another. And responsiveness is what leads to a person feeling loved and appreciated in a relationship. The next slide. A healthy relationship involves mutuality. That means it's not just about me, my needs, and what I want, but it's about we, because we are a unit now and we are looking out for each other's needs. It also involves a commitment. This is stating your desire for the relationship to continue. It's not, sometimes we say relationships are for a reason or a season or a lifetime. A committed relationship is saying that I'm in it for the long haul.
Mm.
And a healthy relationship is interdependent. That means each partner is mutually reliant on one another in a healthy way. And you're saying that I'm dependent on you in order for this relationship to thrive. Next slide. So, what does interdependence in a relationship looks like? It's like I said, that we're dependent upon each other in a healthy way. That means I'm dependent on you to pull your weight financially. I'm dependent on you to provide emotional support, to be attentive to my needs emotionally, and I'm going to do the same for you. And if it's an intimate relationships, that both persons are invested to making sure that they're sexually satisfied and mutually dependent upon each other to fulfill that need. If you have property, you're going to be using and sharing property and obtaining or purchasing property together. If there are kids in the house, you're going to be providing mutual support of children, personal care, that if I'm sick and I need someone to help take care of my activities of daily living, I might need you to help me to get dressed. So in an interdependent relationship, we're depending on our partner to take care of us personally. And also, if you're living in a household together, that you're going to be supportive in doing cooking and cleaning, and we're going to be interdependent in that way. Next slide. So, an interdependent relationship is a healthy relationship, but we know that sometimes people enter into a codependent relationship, and I want to talk about that. Next slide. So, a codependent relationship is the opposite of an interdependent relationship.
Mm.
So, in a codependent relationship, you don't see your own thoughts, feelings, and actions because your focus is on the other person. Codependency is that you will allow another person's behavior to control your feelings, your thoughts, and your emotions. So you are moved by their mood. You can't really access your own feelings and thoughts because you're concerned or consumed with your partner's thoughts. In codependency, your worth and value comes from what others think about you. Safety in a codependent relationship comes from you feeling needed. If your partner doesn't show that they need you, then you don't feel emotionally safe in that relationship. In a codependent relationship, you react rather than, so you don't take initiative to act or to make a decision, but your responses are contingent upon your partner. So this type of unhealthy codependent relationship is what leads to low self-esteem, depression, the numbing of your emotions, health problems, and of course, relationship problems. The next slide. So on this slide, I'm comparing, putting side by side what an interdependent relationship looks like versus a codependent relationship. So in an interdependent relationship, as I said earlier, there is mutual reliance upon one another. In a codependent relationship, one person is doing more of the work, more of the giving. An interdependent relationship looks like I'm able to ask for and give help. Whereas in codependency, I don't ask for help. The other person doesn't ask for help, but I assume what they need. I take initiative to take care. So I enable, which means I restrict the other person from having their own voice. So I anticipate your need instead of allowing the other person to be autonomous and making decisions. We enable and we maintain the status quo of a relationship. An interdependent relationship is one in which you are your own independent person, whereas in codependency, you are unable to function independently because you're so connected to your partner.
Mm.
Interdependency means that I'm free to be my authentic and unique self, whereas in codependency, you lose sight of your own self. You lose your sense of self. You lose your voice. In an interdependent relationship, there's honesty and the ability to admit mistakes. In a codependent relationship, there's a lot of denial, a lot of defensiveness. And this is what keeps the relationship stagnant. There's no freedom to make a mistake. There's no freedom to own up to what you have done to create problems within the relationship. Next slide. So, in an interdependent relationship, you fully experience your own feelings. Whereas in codependency, you don't own your feelings, you absorb other people's feelings. In an interdependent relationship, you know your worth and value. You know that I am who God says I am. But in codependency, you rely on your partner to provide that worth and value. In an interdependent relationship, you feel safe and you feel secure. In codependency, there's fear, the fear of rejection, the fear of criticism, and the fear of abandonment. So, in that environment, you can't feel safe and secure. And then the interdependent relationship is one where you're able to disagree and you're able to say no without fear or of conflict. But in a codependent relationship, there is no freedom to say no because in a codependent relationship, you need to be needed. And if you stand up and you speak your mind, you're afraid that the relationship will end. So therefore, you don't set healthy boundaries because you need to be needed. Next slide. So when we talk about healthy relationships, we know that codependency is the result of having an insecure attachment styles. And I want to say more about attachment theory. So, attachment theory helps us to see the correlation between the way we bonded with our parents and how we will respond in our adult relationships. So, codependency can be the result of what we call an insecure attachment style. So, attachment styles basically is the way that we interact and behave in our relationships. Okay. So the first attachment style is the secure style. So in secure attachment, the child receives consistent care, attention, and the parents are consistently meeting the child's needs. When she's hungry, she gets fed. When her diaper is dirty, she gets changed. You know, when there's a need for attention, the parent is providing that child the attention. So in her adult relationships, he or she can trust easily. They're attuned to their own emotions as well as the emotions of others. They are able to communicate their needs. They respect the needs of other people. They are able to self soothe. They are able to tolerate separation from their parents, from separation in general, rather, because they were able to have that consistent care, attention, and nurturing from their parents. And they are therefore able to give and receive love. So the parents have provided for them a mirror of what a healthy relationship looks like. Next slide. So the next attachment style is one of three unhealthy attachment styles, or what we call an insecure attachment style. This one is called avoidant, and some writers said call it avoidant dismissive. So in the avoidant attachment style, that child was ignored or rejected, attention and affection was withheld, they weren't comforted when they cried or were in distress. So in their adult relationships, he or she is dismissive of attention, dismissive of affection. This child, or this adult, focuses on taking care of him or herself. They can appear to be cold, emotionally disconnected, doesn't trust others easily. They project that I can take care of my own needs. And he or she has learned ways to take care of themselves because they had to do that in order to survive in an unhealthy environment as children. The next slide. So the next insecure attachment style is the ambivalent resistant style. This is a child who had problems separating from the parents. They experienced separation anxiety. They didn't feel free to explore their environment. Their parents were inconsistent in meeting their needs. Sometimes they were held, sometimes they got food when they were hungry, sometimes they received adequate attention. So, therefore, this child doesn't accept comfort because it was provided inconsistently as a child. So, in adult relationships, this child will grow up to feel insecure in relationships, to have constant fears, the fear of rejection, the fear of being separated from a partner. They will be clingy, afraid of being alone. They will overreact to disagreements because disagreement and conflict poses a threat of loss. So, this is a child who has grown up as an adult that will need constant validation and reassurance in order to feel safe emotionally. Next slide. So the last insecure attachment style is the disorganized style. Now, this is a child who grew up with abusive and neglectful parents. These are the children who will respond with an attempt to connect, but they don't trust that their parent will connect. So, therefore, they will be defensive in order to protect themselves from further hurt or further neglect. So this is a child who sees no real value in him or himself or others because their parents did not reflect that to them, that they were valued, that they were heard. So in their adult relationships, they're going to behave with aggressiveness. They're going to be violent. They might have explosive anger. They might have difficulty keeping a job because of the resistance to authority. They might have difficulty with housing because if you can't keep a job, you can't pay your rent. And they will have difficult relationships and multiple relationships. This person will be detached, will use anger as a defense mechanism to protect them from further hurt. This is a person who will have problems showing empathy, difficulty having emotional connection with others, and therefore very little respect for others. But this person, deep down, will desire connection. But because of the abuse or the neglect, it's difficult for them to acknowledge that. Next slide. So I want to just take a deep dive into these attachment styles. So the question might be, well, how does a person who might have been raised with secure attachment? Parents were there, they were attentive, they met their need, but as an adult, they demonstrate one of these insecure attachment styles. So the answer to that is that as adults, we can choose, and sometimes we choose unhealthy partners. We know that association promotes assimilation. We can adopt unhealthy behaviors. Mental illness might occur. We might experience trauma. So, a child who was raised in a secure environment as the adult can demonstrate insecure attachment behaviors. You can have a bad breakup as an adult, and that can impact your attachment style. You can be a child who grew up being bullied, and that can affect your style. You can be a victim of domestic violence or any other type of trauma, and that will impact how you relate in relationships, and that can cause a dysfunctional and unhealthy relationships. Next slide. So let's dig deep into the avoidant style. We know that this was a child who was ignored and rejected, and affection was withheld. So let's look at the parent of this child. Maybe they were mentally ill themselves, so that's why they could not consistently provide attention. Maybe they were substance abusers. Maybe there was physical absence of a mother or a dad, or emotional absence. Maybe these parents had poor models of what consistent parenting looked like. Maybe the parents were preoccupied with themselves, or with work, with church, or with other people. So that's a deeper look into how someone develops an avoidant attachment style. Next slide. So the ambivalent resistant style, this is the child who had inconsistent meeting of their needs, didn't accept comfort. But let's look at what were the possible variables. Maybe the parents were inconsistent because there was some parental absence. Perhaps there was divorce, there was poverty. The parents had poor models of self-soothing and comfort. Maybe the parents themselves had mental illness, depression, or anxiety, or they themselves were preoccupied with trying to make a living. And these are the parents that might have had inconsistent parenting themselves. Next slide. The disorganized attachment style, the child who was abused and neglected. The parents themselves, maybe they were abused. Maybe unhealthy ways of managing anger was modeled. Maybe their parents were rejecting. Maybe there was mental illness in the home. There was abusive parenting, and the parents themselves might have experienced trauma. Next slide. So, what I want to make sure we are hearing tonight is that many people have grown up in environments where there was insecure attachment. But secure attachment can be learned. Children learn what they live, that's true. But as adults, when we learn the tools about how to communicate, when we look at our own attachment environments, we can recognize those things that we are trying to recreate in our adult relationships. Because as adults, what we do is we reenact experiences from our childhoods. And what we do is we bring these models, we bring our emotional experiences from childhood into our adult relationships. If our experience was healthy, then we enact healthy ways of communicating, healthy ways of showing love. If our uh, environment was unhealthy, we recreate unhealthy ways of trying to get love, trying to show love, unhealthy ways of communicating, unhealthy ways of communicating what we need from our partners. So, the good news is that once we recognize our own attachment style, once we recognize the attachment style of our intimate partners, then we can have better understanding of ourselves and of our relationship. And we can realistically ask God for healing and for change. So, the last thing I want to say as I stop is that these ways of attaching, these unhealthy or healthy attachment styles, really become our core beliefs. Those things that we believe about ourselves. If your way of attaching was healthy, then you have a secure belief. I'm okay. I'm loved. I'm safe. I am enough. If the attachment style was unhealthy or insecure, then you're going to believe I'm not okay. I'm unloved. I'm not safe. And I'm not enough. And this is what you will exhibit in your adult relationships. Thank you. And those are just resources, additional resources that I create.
Wow, Dr. Cook, it's just so much to unpack there. There's so much to unpack there. And I know that Roz actually has a question. So Roz?
Yes, hello, hello. Thank you so much. That was amazing. That's great information. As a health coach, I deal with a lot of families, and that's one of the things that I bring to the forefront in the minds of families when it comes to healthy relationships, right? So my question is this: what made my antenna go up was when you were talking about the child, when
Mm-hmm.
you were talking about the children and how they are, the impact that the children have. So this is my question. What I see a lot is electronic devices as babysitters. What do you think, or what is your thought on parenting? I mean, you just opened up a lot for me to think about. As you know, I used to say they're giving the parents are giving these devices to the kids to keep them, keep them occupied so that um, they don't have to actually go in and deal with them because they're dealing with things themselves. Tell me your thought about that. Tell me your thought
I
about that.
think that the more we are in tune and connected to electronic devices, then the less likely we will be able to develop healthy communication skills. It's creating this barrier between ourselves and others, because we have this device, this gadget that I'm relating with, I'm communicating, I'm interacting with. And that's replacing human interaction, human connection, healthy conversation, reflecting, listening. Because when you're looking at a screen, how are you actually connecting and listening to your child or to your parent? Because these screens, these devices, they do inhibit normal, healthy ways of communicating and connecting, with humans.
That is that's so key. I mean, with everybody, but that's so key. But I have a passion for the child, because when I see it, and and I'm not judging, I'm just saying it's just enlightening, because when I see it with a child watching a device all the time, and the parents are arguing, or whoever, I don't know. That's my perception, that it's parents, but they're in a negative conversation, and the child is there. I'm wondering, is that child really, really involved in what they're doing there? Or is what's happening around them impacting them subconsciously or subliminally? I don't know. I just wonder.
I think it's both. I think they hear what, because children may not acknowledge what's going on, but they hear, they pay attention, and they watch. I notice it in things that happen in my own family. So that was an awesome presentation. I'm kind of allowing this stuff to marinate because there's so much. Because I recognize that as an adult, I experienced some of all of those
Mhm.
styles, and going into relationships. I actually went into adult intimate relationships without an authentic identity to begin with, and it has affected my intimate relationships with women, my marriage that I no longer have. And so, how does one? How do we begin to make the healthy choices for ourselves as adults when we recognize some of these behaviors? How do we change?
I think the first step is awareness,
Mhm.
being able to see yourself, being able to recognize your patterns. And so, what we do is we teach what is unconscious to become conscious. Because
Mhm.
sometimes these behaviors, these patterns, these choices are subconscious because we gravitate to what we're familiar with.
Mhm.
If we have lived with one of these unhealthy attachment styles, then that's what we're comfortable with. But
Mhm.
once we get the information and we see that, oh, this is not healthy, then you can begin to make better decisions, knowing what's not healthy within yourself and within your relationships, and beginning to set those boundaries, beginning to learn how to be interdependent. If you see that you're codependent, then recognize, no, I need to make my own decisions. I need to follow my own emotional information concerning what's the best decision for me.
Hmm. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The key is becoming self-aware. Because I look at how people relate to one another. We allow the bitterness to start driving us. I look at male and female relationship where women get hurt on a continuous basis, so they become hardened. And so now when they look for relationships, they only looking for relationships for what they can get out of, for what we can get out of it. And the same with men. Men, I see now, they want women that can take care of themselves, as opposed to them seeing themselves as a provider, as a a leader, and it's like a constant battle rather than valuing one another as we both need each other.
Right.
Do
Yeah.
you recognize any of that?
I think, oh, I'm sorry. Did you say Jeanette?
Anybody? That's anybody.
But one thing I just want to say, that trust issue is so important, because I think that's what causes us to put up barriers, is trust. You know, I'm going to put this barrier up because I don't want you to hurt me. So we put those barriers up, and we are afraid to be authentic, afraid to be vulnerable, and therefore we cannot be interdependent, because there is this lack of trust. There's this fear of being hurt, you know. So we engage in these unhealthy relationship patterns that keep our relationships on the surface level. But once we begin to look at, you know, our own styles, that they're unhealthy, and try to create healthier patterns and healthier ways of responding, then we will always be stagnant in our relationships and not have them to thrive.
I don't know what happened with. Did we lose? There she is.
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Moderator.
I am here. I was just waiting for you all to answer all of your questions. And I think now we're going to have Adana. Adana, can you introduce yourself to everyone while I pull up your slides?
Yeah, hi, I'm Adana Massey, and I'm a mental health therapist at Totally Whole. And this discussion is moving right where what I'm talking about. I think I might answer some of your questions, Lori.
Do you want to go ahead and answer her questions now? Are you saying in your
in the presentation?
Okay. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pull this up.
So what I'm going to talk about this evening is building healthy relationships. And you all said it. It's self-awareness. It's knowing. It's noticing, what am I doing wrong? Next slide. One of the risks to building a healthier relationship is how we handle conflict. Conflict can create feelings of rejection if it's not handled in a supportive way, especially those with an insecure attachment. It can reinforce that it's too much work for people who think that they don't have to do much to be in a relationship, and then they can tend to become disrespectful. It could cause people who are anxious and insecure about connecting to fear that conflict will break the relationship. And I think Rosemary, Dr. Cook said something about being afraid that you're going to lose the relationship once you have conflict. But handling conflict in healthy ways can help those who are not securely attached feel that their relationship is not threatened by conflict. Conflict is good. It shows that we are not the same. Each individual comes, you heard of all the things that we come with, different attachments, all of these different things. So it takes work to bring two people together, and that is going to cause conflict. So according to Gottman, John Gottman, he's a relationship specialist. He said how couples manage conflict is a strong predictor of the success or failure of a relationship. It's not that they won't, if they will argue, but how they argue that makes a difference. Next slide. He had 6 predictors of a relationship failure. And so I want you all to listen and kind of come to a place of saying, okay, is this me? Have an open mind of, do I do this? And number one is harsh startup. And when you have a harsh startup, the discussion begins with criticism or sarcasm. And when you have a harsh startup, it's going to end up on a negative note. Uh, a harsh startup, one partner brings up an issue and uses criticism and contempt. Some words that are usually in a harsh startup are always, never, and why. And that brings a real blaming tone to the conversation. But it's better to have a soft startup, approaching the conversation with your partner in a soft way so that your partner can better receive what you're saying. You should complain but not blame. Make I statements instead of you. Focus on how you are feeling and what you need. Describe what is happening, but don't judge. Describe, be polite, and be appreciative. And when you have a harsh startup, the attempts to make nice in the conversation will probably be ignored. Next. Next slide. Okay, so Gottman came up with what he calls the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And these are four things that he says are death to a relationship. The first horseman is criticism. And there's a difference between criticism and complaint. Complaint addresses the specific action, and criticism is more global and adds on a negative words about your partner's character or personality. Now, criticism is very common in relationships. I don't think anybody could say they've never criticized, but it becomes problematic when it's pervasive and it leads to contempt and leads to defensiveness. I'll give you an example. Your wife says there's no gas in the car, or your partner says there's no gas in the car. That's criticism. But then, that's a complaint. There's no gas in the car. Criticism says, why can't you remember anything? I told you 1,000 times to fill up the tank and you didn't. So the criticism goes to the particular incident, and the complaint goes to the particular incident, but the criticism is demeaning and makes someone feel less than. Next slide. The second horseman is contempt. And contempt is something that builds up over negative thoughts about your partner due to unresolved differences. So when you feel contempt, it's just whenever you see them, you use sarcasm, or you be cynical, or name calling, eye rolling, sneering, mockery, hostile humor. When you hear that, that is contempt. And this is very poisonous to the relationship. And it sends a message to the partner that you're disgusted with him or her. And it leads to more conflict rather than reconciliation. Next slide. The next horseman is defensiveness. And that's a way of blaming your partner. And what you're saying is, the problem isn't me, it's you. And that usually escalates. You criticize, you might say a sarcastic statement, and then the person, somebody's going to become defensive. When these horsemen, they kind of just, you pass them all around. You could be very critical, very defensive. So it goes back and forth. An example of the defensiveness is, here's the complaint. Did you pick up the milk from the grocery store like you promised this morning? defensiveness. I was just too busy. You know how busy my schedule is. Why didn't you do it? The defensive partner is not taking responsibility for breaking their promise, and the conflict escalates. And the partner feels like the defensive partner is just blowing them off. And what's the antidote to defensiveness? Just take responsibility. Say, sorry, I forgot. I should have asked you this morning to do it, or let you know I couldn't do it when my day became busy. Next slide. The fourth horseman is stonewalling, turning around, looking away, physically leaving the room. This is all while somebody's trying to talk to you, refusing to answer or talk about the issue at hand. This stonewalling is very common among couples who've been in a negative spiral for a while. And it's due to a lot of built up negativity. If the negativity in the relationship has become so overwhelming that stonewalling is seen as an out. Like if I just don't engage, if I just act like I don't care, then I can just deal with it. And Dr. Cook did talk about a lot of these behaviors or way of dealing with conflict. You get it from what you've seen with modeled in your relationships growing up, and so you actually consciously don't know that this is stonewalling. You saw that it worked for your mother. It looked like it worked for your parents. That, okay, when my father was just too overwhelming, my mother would just shut down. And then after a while, it would just die out. So it looked like it worked. But as you decide to build your own relationship, is that really what you want to bring to your relationship? Are you really saying, do you really want to say to your partner, you don't care? Or do you want to say that in this moment, this is just too much? But because communication wasn't modeled for you, stonewalling is what you use to protect yourself. You don't give any feedback, you don't confront, and you disengage. Next slide. Flooding. And flooding happens when all this negativity is so overwhelming that you just can't take it. You go into the fight or flight. Your adrenaline goes up, your heart is racing. You become hyper vigilant because you just know that this person is going to blow again. And again, you just, instead of engaging in what the criticism and the contempt that's coming at you, you just emotionally disengage. You say, I'm just going to act like it's not here. But that's a safety. We do it with people that we aren't close to. We'll if someone's at work and they going off, you'll say, well, I'm not going to bring myself in here. I'm going to think positively. I'm not going to allow this person's negativity to come into my space. But a lot of times when we get flooded in the relationships, we go to the fight, and that's on the next slide. With the your body language, it goes into the fight or flight. We either engage, become critical, fight back, or we stonewall. And so flooding increases your heart rate and your blood pressure, and you're not able to even hear what the person You know how people say, I saw red? You really do see red. And this not a place of conflict resolution. You're really not able to solve the problem. Next. The fifth warning sign is failed repair attempts. And the repair attempts are efforts that couples make to de escalate, uh, to put the brakes to prevent flooding. They'll say, well, wait, I need to calm down. I need to step away. But when that flooding starts, it's so intense that that cannot happen. Uh, the other person can't even respond to you trying to repair what's happened in the conversation. Repair attempt saves relationships. It helps you to calm down. It decreases the emotional tension. And for some couples, a repair attempt would be you're very angry and you try to put your hand on your mate's shoulder and say it'll be okay, and then they just go off because they're just too flooded, too upset, and when it gets ignored, then it escalates the situation. Next, bad memories. Bad memories are past experiences that are rewritten from a negative hue, or looking at your relationship only from the low points rather than the highlights. It's like words like, he never treated me right. We never enjoyed each other. Sometimes the past is so painful that it's difficult to remember. Uh, you have been hurt. There's so much unforgiveness. A lot of times when you have, a lot of times when you have cheating in a relationship, is so cheating is such a harmful um, thing that comes into the relationship that even it's very hard to resolve, because even when you're trying to work together to heal the cheating, you cannot see the good efforts that a person makes to heal a relationship. You can't see it because you can't forgive. So um, when the memories of the past become so negative in your mind, you don't expect any good in the relationship. Next slide. But there is hope, because you can build a healthy relationship. So Gottman had come up with a sound relationship house theory. And what he says that a foundationally secure partnership is like a house. It has weight band walls and levels that each person builds upon to create a sturdy bond. Next. The first floor of a healthy relationship is building love maps. Love maps is knowing your partner, knowing their likes, dislikes, their friends, their childhood, what makes them relax, what hurts they have experienced, knowing your partner better than anyone else. And we find that oftentimes people skip this part of relationship building. They know a little, they don't share and talk and explore. And this is a very important part. And your love maps are always changing because your experience is changing. So it's important to keep um, open communication with your partner about what's going on in their life. So building love maps, you see, that's the foundation. Really is where you need to start. A lot of times our relationships start more in being physically attracted, and we don't go to the depth of what I really care about. What do I really want in a relationship? What do I like? What connects to me? What don't I like? So the building the love map, yours and your partners, is important to share. Next, the second floor is share fondness and admiration. That's about being kind and grateful and giving gratitude for the things about your partner that you like. You do that by meditating on what you cherish. What did you like about your husband or your boyfriend when you first met him? What the four horsemen and the criticism and the contempt, it piles on you where you can't see what's good. You lose sight of what you cared about in your partner. And reminding yourself and reminding your partner of the things that you loved in them, and appreciate them just for the small things. It it is an antidote to contempt, and it can salvage the relationship. I've had clients who have come in and have been so much in a state of contempt and negativity that they can barely sit next to each other. But once they do sit down and you say, write 3 things that you admire about your partner, instantly you see the change of how people want to feel appreciated. When when that wife says, I admire that he is dedicated, because the criticism and contempt has been so much a part of the relationship. When was the last time she said that to him? So this sharing fondness and admiration is building in the relationship the love and respect that you have for one another. Next, turning towards instead of turning away. And that's the basis of emotional connection, romance, and passion. People want to feel connected. We are made to be emotionally connected. When turning towards is telling your partner that you matter, I hear you. If your partner comes home and says, I had a really bad day at work, and you're sitting watching TV and you ignore, then that gives a message of you don't care. But if you just turn to your partner and say, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that, what happens is your partner is trying to make a connection to you just by making that statement. And you turning, even and affirming that you care about how they feel, you're making that connection. Um, it's making small, it's responding to your partner's bid for attention and support and comfort rather than ignoring. And what you're doing is you're building an emotional bank account. You're building into your relationship, the idea that I care about you because I care about you. So we do two things in a relationship. We put the money in the bank, the emotion, the caring, the love, the passion in the bank, or we take it out by criticizing, ignoring. And Gottman's idea about the emotional bank account is to give you a self-awareness of really thinking about, where did I connect with my partner today or this week? And that bank account serves as a cushion when there's a major stress or conflict, because a person can go back and think in their mind, okay, maybe he's upset today just because it or she, because it was a hard day, versus I'm going to take this personal. Next slide. Floor 4 is the positive perspective. See the best in each other. Don't rush to criticism. And that's called giving grace. Believing the best of your partner. Giving them the benefit of the doubt. If he comes and doesn't do something you ask, don't assume the negative. Don't assume the worst. Floor 5 is managing conflict. Accept your partner's influence. That means you got to compromise. You got to learn to yield versus having to hold on to control. Managing conflict doesn't mean that you never express negative emotions, but it means that you can disagree, but you don't have to be disagreeable. And it's a way of conveying honor and respect. Emotional intelligence says, I know what is good for my relationship. I can't compare my relationship to another relationship, but being emotionally intelligent about your relationship says, I know what works for my partner and me. And then it's good to talk about your problem. And also, you have to learn to self-soothe. And self-soothe is about being able to calm yourself down, come to a place of of not needing your partner to, when you get upset, to calm you down. Learn to quiet yourself, to regulate and regulate your own emotions. And I think Dr. Cook talked about dependence versus interdependence. So you have to learn to manage your own feelings. Okay, next slide. Floor 6, make life dreams come true. Discuss each other's dreams, encourage each other, help each other reach goals. If your partner wants to go to school, support that. If you all want to get together and talk about retirement planning or lifetime goals, you have to encourage and support and help each other reach your goals. And the last floor is create shared meaning. You're building when you're building a relationship house, you're um, building the understanding of who you are as a couple. You're developing your rituals. You're learning what it means to be the family that you have become. Some rituals of connecting could be doing things that you both enjoy, and you're creating a legacy, stories that you tell. You're developing the beliefs and culture of your relationship. Next slide. And then the final um, piece of the relationship house is the trust and commitment. So you have love as the foundation, trust and commitment as the support system. And you all were talking about it earlier. Trust is very important in a relationship. Once you lose trust, it takes a lot of work to get it back. What are some ways to build trust, love, and loyalty in relationship? You make trustworthiness a priority, and you act to maximize your partner's well-being, and know that trust is built in small positive moments. You avoid negative comparisons, and you regularly focus on the positive qualities versus the negative faults. Next slide. Right, what I'm showing here is a healthy relationship wheel. Accountability, safety, honesty, support, cooperation, trust, and this all comes in the center. We have respect. You have all of these components that connect to what is a part of a healthy relationship. Next. Tina Turner asked the question, what's love got to do with it? Next. Tina saw love as a secondhand emotion. She was emotionally detached from her mother, physically and sexually abused in her marriage, wanted to be loved. But love is the basis of all healthy relationships. Love is the foundation, and trust and commitment bear the weight of the relationships. All three must be stable in order for couples to be able to stand as they work towards building and maintaining the relationship. Next. A relationship is like a house. When the light bulb goes out, you don't go and buy a house, you fix the bulb. Next. Finally, I just want to leave a few quotes from Dr. Gottman. Happy marriages are based on a deep friendship. Do you have a deep friendship with your partner? You don't have to solve your marital, all your major marital conflict to thrive. And finally, acknowledging and respecting each other's most deepest personal hopes and dreams is the key to saving and enriching your marriage or your relationship. Relationships take work. It's like a house. Once you build a house, you have to renovate. Things get old. You have to update. So healthy relationships require continuous work. And so I hope from this presentation that you could look at some of the things that we spoke about and do a self-evaluation of where am I in my relationships? What do I bring in the relationships, and how can I be more healthy in my relationship?
Wow, thank you so much for that amazing presentation. As you was talking, there was something in particular that stood out to me that I just recognized this week that I'm still working through and working on is that fear of conflict and correlating that to people quitting on me, because I've been in abusive relationships in the past, and because I've, experienced, partners, cheating and all of that stuff. And even with, friendships, when there's conflict arising, it's just like we have this new thing now called the cancel culture. I don't know if you heard of that, where it's just like if someone, if you have a disagreement or an argument, it's just like you're canceled. It's just like we don't want to talk things out. We don't want to fix it. It's just like everybody is so easily disposable. And what I realized is that this week, actually, like when I see conflict in friendships, it's just like I'm quick to think like so far left that it's just like, oh, they're not gonna want to work with me anymore. They're not gonna want to be with me anymore. They're not gonna be this anymore. All because of one little disagreement that they're not even thinking about anymore. But I'm so wrapped up in my head that I'm thinking that way because of what I've been through, and I'm accustomed to when things get hard, people leave me.
Mm-hmm.
That is just like, wow. Like, not only am I working on that within myself, but it's something that I have to change, because it's like I feel like I'm projecting my past wounds and my past trauma onto people that are not like, that was just a disagreement. Like, what's the big deal? But for me, it's a big deal because I'm thinking you're going to leave me because we got into this disagreement.
Well, that's what that part right there, that's self-awareness. In a relationship, you have to know who you are. And that's what you're doing. Instead of you're working to not project it on the relationship, but
Correct.
recognize, okay, what is this? What is this in me? And that's why I was hoping with this presentation, it will be more about self-reflection and awareness and noticing of what is happening with me. And then, do I want to keep creating this in my relationships?
Yes. So yeah, thank you for that. So at this time, Dr. Cook, we're going to bring on two special guests before we get into Jamel's presentation. So can you introduce your guests as I bring them into the broadcast?
Okay, I want to introduce Nikki and Derek. They are two former clients of mine. I saw them as a couple first, then I saw them in individual therapy. So they have a wealth of knowledge and experience from being clients of both couples and individual therapy. So I will bring them on, and I have some questions that I'm going to pose to them. So the first question that I want to ask, and either one will decide who will answer first. Can you briefly describe the reason that the two of you started marital counseling?
Shoot. Hi, Dr. Cook. You want to go, Doc?
Ladies first.
Oh. So, I when we decided to go to marital counseling, I believe it probably was maybe like the third or fourth time I had suggested it, and for me, it was the point of, okay, you know what? If this isn't going to work, we can't come to an agreement together. I was threatening divorce, and I think that may have been the initiative that Derek needed to agree for us to go to marital counseling. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't know. It was to in the beginning to work on our marriage, and then I think as we were going through it, it became to basically co-parent. Well, how can we co-parent, coexist, for our kids. So that's where it grew to.
Right.
I agree. We couldn't get along for our children.
Yeah. And you wanted to learn to be better co-parents.
Right.
Yes.
And somehow in the course of the marital counseling, you decided that we want to really give it a try. Let's give the marriage a try.
At one time,
But you want to talk, Nicole?
No, you go ahead.
Okay, well, I think at
Go
one
ahead.
time, yeah, but I just think it just I think I just didn't want to fail. I didn't want my marriage to fail. So yeah, I wanted to try because I love Nicole. I love my family. But I think not more so, not just her, but it just I didn't feel it just wasn't gonna work.
Mm-hmm.
Like the trust was gone.
Okay.
So that was the biggest thing.
For me, I agree. I didn't want my marriage to fail. It was a generational thing for me. Like a lot of my family members have been through divorce, and I didn't want to fail either. So it was like, all right, I'm married, so we're gonna have to make this work. And also, it was a personal thing, but I didn't learn this until after I started seeing you individually. Um, that it was more of a fear of being by myself.
Okay. So that leads me to the next question. What insights led you to conclude that you may not have been in a healthy place before, during, or after the split?
Well, before I didn't realize it. I know you had mentioned to us about codependency and, being whole, but that was foreign language to me then. I didn't
Mhm.
understand what that meant.
Right, right.
Um, During the separation period, it started to make a little sense, but I didn't know who I was as an individual. I only knew myself as a marriage or in a codependent relationship.
Mhm.
So, and even then, I didn't know it was toxic. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
until I started seeing you after the divorce and
Mm-hmm.
starting to get to know who I was as an individual, I realized that it was toxic. Um, I was dependent on Dirk a lot for my happiness. Nothing he could do, nothing he did, he could make me happy. And I was trying to push him to be something that he wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think the biggest answer, I didn't have any before or during, but like when it was just me and you one on one, I did learn that I had a real inability to communicate in a good way. So I would hold things in, not communicate my feelings, in the fear of like having an argument, and which I didn't want to do. And I held a lot of things in emotionally, just fear of being judged, but not even giving her the chance to see my emotions.
Mm.
So I learned that much.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, can I
Okay.
piggyback off that?
Sure.
It was the communication as well. But again, at that time, I didn't know that's what it was. So our conflict styles, he was more of he clammed up a lot, and I was more of the sharp,
Mhm.
like pushing. And oh my God, we bump heads so
Yeah,
bad. So
yeah,
yeah,
we
we
did.
didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm. So, were there any unrealistic expectations you had for the marriage?
Oh yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Again,
well,
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh, well, for me going in, not I didn't really have any because I didn't know anything about marriage. So it was just like I was just going in. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't really know. I mean, I knew people that were married in my family, but I didn't talk to anybody to get any guidance or nothing. So I just went in, just all I knew was what I seen on TV. So it was just like I'm just in it.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah. Didn't have any healthy models of what
Right.
a healthy marriage looks like. Yeah.
Not at all.
Right. No healthy models, but no initiative to look for those healthy models ourselves until
Yes.
we, came to seek you. It was just
Mhm.
like, all right, we just going in here blind leading the blind, don't know what we're getting in ourselves into. We were young.
Very
And like I
young.
said before, I I didn't know who I was as an individual, so I was really putting a lot of my happiness on him. I think a lot of my childhood traumas started to come out as well. And I was expecting him to heal them. Again, just looking back, I didn't know what this was then, but very unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. How did your mental health affect your relationship and your relationship decisions within the relationship? And childhood trauma is one, you know, type of mental illness that will impact your relationship. What about
Mm.
you, Derek? Going, how did your mental health affect
Well,
it?
well, during the relationship, I was real guarded, so I didn't really. My mental health was fine, I feel, until I think after. So after I learned, I really started realizing after seeing you and becoming a little more spiritual and just realizing that a lot of like my pain became like mismanaged and part of my personality. So like I felt like after our marriage, I didn't trust anybody. I wouldn't let anybody get close to me again. I me putting up the walls around my heart, like they got very reinforced.
Mm-hmm.
I got into a dark place where not like wanting to hurt myself, but just like to where I ain't care about nobody else's happiness except for mine. So I think it changed me. But the more that I listened to you, talked to you, and dug into, my spirituality, I got better.
Okay. So, having gone through couples counseling and individual counseling, what have you taken away that will help your current relationships to thrive? What tools, what insights do you think have made you better and will help you to have healthier relationships?
Nicole?
Well, well, I'm in a healthy relationship now. I feel like it's healthy because we do everything you talked about in the first slide. We're not codependent on each other. We communicate. It's very healthy. And it just, I don't know, it just feels right. Like I've never been in a relationship where I feel like I can be myself 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And before I even got into this relationship, I had to do a lot of work on myself. You asked the question about, I'm sorry, what was your last question? You
I said,
asked about,
tools have you learned to help your relationships to thrive?
no, the prior question that you asked, Derek, about mental health.
Oh, yeah. How did your mental health affect your relationship or your relationship decisions?
Right. So when Derek and I met, I was still in foster care. I was all screwed up. So I had to do a lot of healing, not only from my childhood, but also from my previous marriage, and finally get a chance to know who I am before I could bring myself into a relationship. So that's how I am aware that I'm in a healthy relationship now.
Mhm. Okay, good. You did the work. Yeah. Derek?
It was hard, but yes.
My biggest thing is just communicating. Like I'm just working on my communication, like not communicating how I feel, communicating what I want, and I think that was the biggest downfall that I had, like not communicating, not knowing how to communicate really.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for having the
Mhm.
courage to come on to tell your story so that you can other couples and other individuals to learn, how to be healthy
Mhm.
and how to learn
Yeah.
to have better and healthier relationships. So I wish
No,
both
yeah.
the best.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
All
Thank
right.
you for having us.
You're
All
welcome.
right, Dr. Cook.
All right. Take
All
care.
right.
You too.
All right. So again, thank you, Dr. Cook, for that. Thank you, Nikki, and thank you, Derek, for just being so vulnerable and transparent and open to just come on and just share your journey with us. And we know that someone was blessed, and someone some wife, some husband is looking at you all story and saying, hey, let's give our marriage another shot. Let's give our marriage another chance. So thank you both for that. So Jermel, can you go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone as I pull up your slides?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. First, I want to thank Dr. Cook for inviting me to this. This is a wonderful workshop. I believe that there are, like, as you said, many people being informed during this process. And so I am thankful for being a part of it. So I am Jamel Gilliam. I am a father, a husband, a brother, a son. And so during this process, what I'm going to share is basically the discussion of trauma, pain, and relationships as it relates to men. And oftentimes, people aren't as aware or open to hearing what men are thinking about. So a lot of my research is about men, particularly Black men, because I just happen to be a part of that population. And so what I want are for people to understand what are some. This isn't an exhausted presentation because there's definitely more information that could be researched, but I plan to give some information as relates to myself, using myself as a demographic, friends, my cohort that I belong to, a lot of my fraternities and organizations that I belong to, those men, in addition to the community work that I've done as a clinician. So with that being said, I hope I've introduced myself. There's a lot I could say about myself, so I'm not sure.
Yes.
Incidentally, I am a former employee of Totally Whole Pastoral Counseling Services.
Yes.
Just wanted to, like I said before, talk about that as relate to trauma, pain, and relationship as relates to men. So you can forward to the next slide. So why should we have this conversation about men? Because men often are silent as they suffer, and they don't address their pain. I think the young man who spoke earlier kind of shared that. We didn't pre-plan this. That just happens to be one of the dynamics of men, that they just don't talk about it. If you don't talk about it, then it doesn't exist, and perhaps it'll go away. Feelings can oftentimes be intimidating. The second point is that men sometimes act out. And I use the term act out because I think oftentimes we may use that as relates to children. But the reason why I say act out is because there are a lot of behaviors that are, they're the result of past environments. That's something that comes normal. It's comfortable. It may not necessarily be healthy, and I'll talk about that some more, but it is something that happens. Men suffer traumas. That's something that's not readily talked about in the community. I think oftentimes we talk about women being victimized physically, sexually, emotionally. However, that does happen to men. I've met my fair share of men who were themselves abused physically, sexually, if you could believe it. And a lot of times people, maybe they're uncomfortable in talking about that, and men aren't necessarily readily available with their feelings about that, but it does happen. And so men suffer traumas. And I'll talk more about that as well. The fourth one is men could further perpetuate their trauma onto their children. That kind of explains itself. Oftentimes when, sexual or physical traumas happen, folks tend to believe, hey, this is the normal way of things, and I'm going to just do what was done to me. And so, I think that's something to discuss in this conversation because it's not as often talked about. And lastly, men are human beings too. That is important to remember. Oftentimes I hear, I'll go ahead and say that most of my individual clients happen to be women. Sometimes women will be more forthcoming with their information and their feelings than men will be. And so I have to often share with them that he's doing the best he can. If they're talking about their significant other, he's doing the best he can with the skills that he's been blessed with. So we can forward to the next slide. So let's begin this. When we talk about suffering in silence, I think it's one of those. Is it going to pop up? Okay.
No, I don't think nothing is popping up. I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yeah, I can't. I'm not sure. Let me go to it real quick because I'm curious as to why that's not popping up. it's a whole other.
Yeah, this is the next slide. I don't know why it's not popping up.
Yeah, it skipped. Let me make sure I am not missing
Did you
something.
just want to talk from it and tell us what it was?
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up right now. Let me.
Okay.
It is. So when we talk about suffering in silence, so there's 4 points: depression and anxiety, and other maladjustments. So men suffered from depression and anxiety that oftentimes will be to their own detriment. It'll exacerbate into other things, into their lives, into their vocation. If they work, if they have families that they're a part of, that they may um, demonstrate those anxieties and depression. Those things play themselves out in these relationships, in these families, and we see it in the community. Two, it says men may develop somatic conditions as a result of their internal suffering. If anyone's familiar with ACEs, ACEs is a scale that I would encourage anyone to consider taking. It's 10 questions, and basically what ACEs is adverse childhood experiences. And if your score is over, I believe 2 or 3, and sometimes some people have 7 or 8, it demonstrates that there is a correlation between your traumas that you've experienced and maybe your potential health challenges that you may endure as you get older. And that does happen, whether it be high blood pressure, heart disease, further mental illness. There are so many different things that come as a result when folks aren't resolving or addressing their traumas. The third thing is men often settle for toxic relationships themselves, and that's important. Like I said before, oftentimes there are women that share what they're unhappy about in relationships. And what I've seen is that there are men who are themselves in unhealthy relationships, and they aren't willing to talk about what's going on from their perspective. Maybe it's something going on with their partner that they don't like, and they're not willing to share that. And so that's something to really discuss. What is it that you're unsatisfied about in that relationship? Lastly, men give up on life in the form of substance use, alcoholism, and promiscuity. And that's important. I think oftentimes we like to talk about people suffering and they'll just drink themselves to death. Some people may use substances, marijuana, other drugs, but also promiscuity is a form of medication in itself, and people will medicate and find themselves in trouble, whether it be multiple children, STDs, and as you know, sometimes even death. So that's really important to keep in mind when we talk about suffering in silence. You can forward to the next slide. I'm not sure why that didn't show though. Hopefully that's not going to happen again. So
technology.
yeah. So men acting out, and that really acting out is really, it discusses unhealthy coping. That's really important. Maybe there's some abusive behaviors that go on. Maybe they're abusing their spouse. Maybe they're abusing themselves. That's something to really discuss. If they're not resolving the trauma and pain in their relationships. Long-term mental health challenges, as I said before, that is a thing that exists in many relationships where, if not addressed, we're talking about long-term mental health that could, people find themselves homeless, oftentimes chronically unemployed. Mental health is treatable, but oftentimes when folks they don't manage it, it gets worse and they find themselves spiraling out of control. Violent behaviors, that is important because, as you know, people's freedom become compromised if they're not willing to talk about their pain and their trauma. They act out violently, and of course, we know that police will one, shoot first and ask questions later. That does happen, and oftentimes people's freedom compromised where they end up in jail. That is something that should be discussed. Passive behaviors. Folks may passively, act out towards their spouse or in the community that, hey, I'm not deliberately doing something. I'm doing it on the subtle. Maybe they have some problems with theft. Maybe they have some problems with communication. Maybe they have problems with, I talked about keeping a job. There's some passive things that they may get a pass on because folks don't say that's being too bad, but ultimately it becomes a problem for someone else. Reckless behaviors. And I know I discussed substance misuse and abuse, but reckless behavior could come in the form of other things, whether it be the partying culture, a lot of partying, a lot of reckless behaviors, multiple sex partners, as a matter of fact, unprotected sex partners. That's also reckless behaviors. There's a lot of things that people engage in that not only hurt themselves but hurt other people, and so I would consider that to be a reckless behavior. You can forward to the next slide, please. So men do suffer traumas. Oftentimes, they don't talk about it. You may find that some folks are sexually reactive. Maybe they've been sexually abused. There's a writer by the name of Mike Mike Hunter, and it's actually spelled MIC, so it may be Mick, but Mick Hunter. He does a lot of research on men who have been abused, and he considers them the often undiscussed or the neglected abused. Oftentimes, people won't talk about what happened to them as men for fear of judgment, for their own judgment of themselves. They just don't talk about it because they don't want to be seen as weak. And so men do talk about that, and it becomes a problem for them later. And one of the problems that you will see, I talked about before, is promiscuity. That is a big deal. Another one is questioning their sexuality. They may struggle with who they are depending on their offender who had abused them. That comes out. And usually those two, the second and the third point, actually play into themselves, because oftentimes there's this overuse of sex to prove that they are something. And I think that's something that happens quite frequently. The last point is could become violent towards others in their families and or communities. And we see that quite often. Not many are willing to talk about what has happened to them when they were victimized as a young person. And that in itself could be a problem. Now, I talk specifically on this slide about sexual trauma, but that doesn't leave out physical trauma. If someone was physically abused, if someone was emotionally abused, that also plays itself as well. You see that as my folks that have presented before me talked about the relationships. If there's a history of these types of traumas, oftentimes they play out themselves in relationships with adults. Please forward to the next slide. So there's this perpetuation of behaviors onto children and community. And I talk about children and community on this saying because the community doesn't know what's going on. Children are your children. Your children love you regardless. They're like, Dad, what's happening to you? What's going on with you? The community is just existing. And so if the community is just functioning and then you show up with your unhealthy and toxic behaviors, oftentimes they're caught off guard and by surprise. And so, with men, as we see Mr. T here, and I love Mr. T because I watched 18 when I was a kid, there's this belief in gender normative behaviors. And so it's this whole men don't cry, men don't do chores. And, I had to really pay attention to that. I have a 15-year-old son and I have an 18-year-old daughter. And just being cognizant of the fact that there was a time when I would say to my son when he was younger, don't cry, and why? Why not? When we talk about what does it look like in the later years when men don't communicate? Because when they were young, they were told that they shouldn't cry. And, why not? It doesn't take anything from him. As a matter of fact, if he is able to allow his emotions to flow, he will function. He'll be happy. He'll probably be more sensitive to his partners. There's a lot of things that come from allowing yourself to cry. And so I do not want to take that from him. Another thing is men not doing chores. Now, don't tell my wife that I said that, but that is a thing. I think oftentimes there's this whole male, what's the term I'm looking for? When males are special, and it's really not important. I mean, as long as whatever it takes to keep the household going happens, then who cares who washes the dishes or mops the floor? It happens. As a matter of fact, my wife will tell you, I probably mop the floor better than she does, and that's fine. I mean, my friends aren't going to judge me for that. I mean, it keeps the house clean. And then, another perpetuation of the behaviors on the community and children, and even I'll add self, is the resistance to change. When that does not happen, so many people lose. When there's this resistance to change, nothing happens, nothing evolves, things stay the same, no one grows, nothing grows. And so it's important that we pay attention to that. I'll say that I'm always a vessel that's changing. I'm ever changing and ever evolving. And I think it's important for men to see themselves as that. And I'll talk about that some more later on in this workshop.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to the next one. I'm not sure why. Okay, so this is doing this again. Okay, hold on for a second. Okay, well, there you go. I saw something. Oh, wait a minute, not that. Okay. Not sure why this is doing it. So the previous slide with the men kind of embracing each other, it says men are human beings too. And I'll read the two slides. It says any person that has decided that men are the enemy in their lives must remember that they too have fathers, sons, uncles, friends, etc. And it says, like women, many men did not ask for the current dynamic of society, but are afraid to challenge it. So by those 2 points, I'll go by the first one. There are many men in this society who are just asking for an opportunity to live and be free and be themselves. And oftentimes they're being seen as the enemy. And so I would like that we really do pay attention, that we're paying attention to the fact that they're citizens of society just like any other, wanting to be loved, wanting to be free, wanting to be accepted. And so that is really important. And to the second point, like I said, men didn't ask for the current dynamic and they're afraid to challenge it. Oftentimes there are things that when we talk about patriarchy and toxic masculinity, oftentimes toxic masculinity is just taken that all men are like that. And it's really important that we pay attention to how we address this, that, many men are looking to love women. They're looking to accept women into their space, and they would like to be healed and whole, just like women are asking to be healed and whole. And so you can go to the next slide. And so healthy men. So what are healthy men? I'll talk about each of these points. So healthy men seek out relationships where healthy communication exists. They constantly work towards the improvement of themselves. They ask for improvement in their relationships. They work on forgiveness. They talk about their feelings more, and they enjoy life. So you can go to the next slide. So seeking out relationships with healthy communication, learning the art of fair fighting. And I think the folks that presented before me did talk about that. Anyone who thinks that being in a marriage or relationship of any type means never fighting, they are really harming themselves believing that. Fighting is in disagreement is going to happen. As a matter of fact, I believe the best way to find out who you are in that relationship is to have a disagreement, because how you resolve it only makes you stronger. It's important, that you learn the art of fair fighting, because this isn't about tearing someone down. This isn't about destroying them. You hear that whole expression of happy wife, happy life. I would go as far as to say it's important that we include ourselves as men into that equation, because if we're not happy, then eventually it's going to spill over onto her. So you want a happy house. So what's that expression now? I think happy house, happy spouse is probably a better expression. But fair fighting is really important to learn, because then you're able to really learn how to be together. Think about it. You are two individuals, and I say this to my wife all the time. You're two individuals from two different sets of parents, whether your parents were together or not. And then you have your own information that you come to that relationship with. And that will determine how you guys show up in that relationship. So that's important. Negative self-talk. That's important to check out from, because oftentimes we say a lot of stuff to ourselves. We'll say, no, they're not going to get the best of me. They're not going to do this. They're not going to do that. Well, be mindful of that negative self-talk. I mean, we're talking about our partners and our spouses, not some stranger on the street. We're talking about someone that eventually, once the disagreement is over, we want to go back to, hopefully you never stopped, but you want to go back to how the relationship was, if not stronger. So being mindful of your negative self-talk and how you engage into battle. Taking space. I'm a firm believer of the man cave. My wife has her own space, the woman cave or the sewing room. That's important. Having your space, whether it be an office, anything. I mean, it should be something where you can kind of take space when needed. I think that's really important. Having something for yourself. So that's important. My wife she loves to sew. That is her thing. She's making quilts, she's making dresses, she's making everything. And my thing, as it relates to now, even though I'm still a doctoral student, my thing is riding bikes, and I like to read, and I love music. And so you have to have something for yourselves. I mean, we come back together throughout the day. We even check on each other since this pandemic. How you doing? How you making out? But having something for yourselves is really important, so you don't feel like you're losing yourself in that relationship. Knowing your triggers, and that's important. You know, if this person says or does this, I'm gonna go off. Well, pay attention to what that is and why. That's important. Knowing what that is. And on the same token, that last thing, let that stuff go. Managing your ego. Some of it is your ego that you feel the need to intellectualize and posture on. Sometimes you can just say, hey, you know, it's not that big of a deal. This is my partner, my life partner, my wife, my husband, whomever. That's important to really think about. I think we get caught up in, I'm going to show them. And you don't have to really show them like that. I mean, we're in this for the long run when we talk about relationships. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so it's doing this again. So improvement of selves. Let me just find that. Okay, on the improvement of selves. I'm sorry. It says develop a life of spiritual practices. That is important because spiritual practices, I mean, we're really talking about prayer, meditation, reading, singing, journaling. There are so many spiritual practices, and I'm only talking about some from, I'll say, the Abrahamic religion. I mean, you know, depending on where your particular religious beliefs are, there's probably a whole lot more. I think that is important that you develop a list of spiritual practices that you're able to engage in for the improvement of yourself. Reading more, that kind of explains itself, but I definitely would encourage anyone to read. And you know, we don't have to read those 500-600 page novels, but we could read something fun and light. I think that's important to kind of, you know, as a means of escaping and getting a little loose. Talking to your friends, but also not non-biased persons. That could, you know, that could go as far as the last thing, the next thing, which is counselor or therapist. But a non-biased person is not someone who has a dog in the fight. He or she is not going to say something negative because they don't like your spouse. They're just going to listen and hear you out. And so the last, I say exercise. I think that's important. You'd be surprised how much is released when you are sweating and exercising. The endorphins that that are flowing when you are engaging in exercise. You can go to the next slide. Improvement in relationships. So ask yourself this in relationships, and some of my partners also talked about this. What are the short-term and long-term goals? Be willing to be honest and compassionate. And so I added those together because oftentimes, you know, the young people use the expression about keeping it real. But sometimes keeping it real does not mean being hurtful. So being honest is important, but being compassionate and really being clear enough where you want something to change. You don't want to say something so hurtful and devastating where they just like, I don't want to be bothered. You know, we're all doing the best we can. And so being honest does have to accompany compassion. I'm not sure what that noise was.
Oh, that's fine. You want me to go over to the next slide?
Yeah. Let me see. Sex shouldn't be the only motivation. I think someone said something about that. Love is wonderful, but there has to be more. Lastly, I want to talk about being truly equally yoked, potential versus reality. There's a lot of conversation about potential. We all have potential. I think, and when we think about what God has purposed us all to be, we all have potential. I mean, let's just be honest about that. And so in reality, what is this person willing to work on? What are they doing? If they're exactly doing what they say they are, you kind of see that. I mean, if you're intimately working with someone, you kind of see it and you see the pattern. So be honest with yourself about that. And we talk about being equally yoked. I don't want to belabor that, but that we have to be honest about that, potential versus reality. You can go to the next one. Forgiveness. There's an expression that talks about a good marriage are two good forgivers or something like that. I think that's really important. I mean, you have to forgive your spouse and yourself. If you're fighting every day, then that means every day. But if you're fighting often, then that means often. But forgiveness is really important. If you're not capable of forgiving, then you're going to struggle in a relationship with anyone. Forgiveness is really important. You can go to the next. Feelings. So I'll ask that, be for the men, be willing to develop a pattern of communication of your feelings. Ask yourself about your beliefs, and have you what have the things been in your past relationships, and what will be different. So that is really important. I think oftentimes when we look to our past relationships, it's important to ask us, what have the things been? If your things have only been, hey, I'm going to be this, and it includes being irresponsible or being the party guy, then maybe you're not ready for a relationship. But if you're really about stepping up to the plate and being honest with yourself, I think that'll be really important. So develop, ask, and have. Um, you can go to the next one. Okay. Enjoy life. Discover a relationship with the higher power and your higher self. Uh, that explains itself. Write it down. Journaling is really important. And I know that oftentimes men aren't accustomed to journaling. I would even go as far as suggesting starting your journals with questions, and then write out the answers to those questions for yourself. And then self-care, travel, exercise, etc. Self-care can take many forms. I would encourage anyone listening to this to explore that. Self-care is really important so that you can be happy and so that you can enjoy this life that we were all blessed with. You can go to the next one. Okay. So that's it. And please feel free to get in contact with me if needed on Facebook or Instagram.
Thank you so much for that. So we have a question for you, Jamel. Cher said, how do you know if your childhood trauma is preventing you from seeing someone who you presently know as a provider of a good, healthy relationship versus someone who may have some of the ideal expectations in a partner, but you're not quite attracted to them?
Okay, and I had to read this so I can also, it's important. I think someone spoke earlier about friendships. That is really important. My wife and I actually have a great friendship. We use a lot of humor. Um, she's my number one cheerleader. You want someone who has those things. When you talk about, it says how long you try. So childhood trauma. Let me just say this: your childhood trauma is something. Hopefully, you're able and willing to seek treatment for and talk about it. You don't want that to carry you around all your adult life. That's something that you should be willing to release it, forgive yourself, forgive that person, and move on. If you are carrying it around, there is no way possible that you can have a healthy relationship, because you'll pretty much have it on your back. It's almost like you're carrying around, I call them ghost stories. You're pretty much telling those same stories. And I would like to say that hopefully right now if you look at your space that you're in right now, that you are safe right now. And so declare that and own it and be happy. You deserve that.
Yeah. It's something that stuck out during your presentation when you had made the statement about, because, we've been conditioned to say, boys don't cry, boys don't cry. And as a mother raising two boys, that is something that I'm very cognizant of, is letting them feel whatever they're feeling and letting them process their emotions. So I can't determine why they're crying. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it may not be something that I understand of why they're crying, but I have to allow them to process their emotions and not block it. Because what I realized, that if I block it by saying, oh, well, boys don't cry or stop crying, then I'm raising boys that will eventually become men, that will eventually become husbands, that will eventually become fathers, that will get into these roles, and then they'll be emotionally detached from their children and their wives, because they've been conditioned and raised to say boys don't cry, boys don't cry. So men aren't going to, they're not going to show their emotions and be emotionally connected to their family. And I think that's something that I've become cognizant of. And I see it now, like some men that are just so emotionally detached. So do you think, the way a person is raised, or maybe the experiences, that they've encountered have caused their like emotional like disconnection, or what can you speak on that one?
So when we talk about emotional disconnection, I think we learn what has become comfortable to us. I mean, and yes, it may be uncomfortable to cry as an adult, but it is something that's needed. I said before, and I'm glad Monica Miller had spelled out the ACEs, adverse childhood experiences.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not willing to explore our feelings, they will become a problem with us later. It's not a question of if, they will.
Yes.
And oftentimes, and women, I want to encourage you to really sit with how you feel about a man crying. There are women who don't want to see an emotional man. I mean, that has been something that is often discussed in rooms, but there's nothing wrong with. I mean, you want him to have some emotion, whether it be to his mother, his daughter, his sister,
Yeah.
you. That is important, and so emotion demonstrates so many strengths, and it will help him in the long run. I mean, he could become sick because he's not addressing his feelings and his emotions. But when we talk about things, I'm glad that you shared. Having two young sons, it's important that a lot of the things that women with male son, with sons are need to be honest about. When we talk about responsibility, they grow up to be the men that you date. So maybe not you, but you're preparing him to have a
Yeah.
young lady that he'll be dating. So be mindful of some of the things that you're saying to him. I mean, if okay, we could talk about dads that aren't necessarily in the picture, but be mindful of what you are exposing him to yourself as a mom. Are you
Mhm.
are you creating some and I use this term very loosely, a no good guy that some other woman's going to complain about, or are you raising a young man who's a gentleman that she's going to speak accolades about later on? So just being mindful of that, that's really important. You know, and because we get it from somewhere. It doesn't, and
Right.
I've met many of young men, little kids who are in therapy with me, and their moms or grandmoms are like not holding them accountable. And I'm like, you creating a monster right now. You got to be mindful. He needs to have chores. He needs to, he needs to have all those things that you're going to expect. I mean, I'm not saying he has to pay the mortgage right now at 12,
Right.
but absolutely he should be taking out the trash and cleaning up behind himself, or else that's going to be a problem when he's 30. So let's
Yes.
just be honest about that.
So before we wrap up, one more question for you, Jamel. So men, how do you so from a male's perspective, for a woman that's listening right now that may be in a relationship with someone who doesn't express themselves, doesn't communicate, um, how can they get their partner to feel safe, to be able to express themselves?
Mhm. The interesting thing is that people communicate. I'm not sure what that is. Somebody invited. Let me see something pop up. So, oftentimes people communicate in different ways. So really, I think that person is communicating. It's just about paying attention. What are they saying when they communicate?
Mm,
They're not oftentimes. I mean, you think that because they're not saying anything that they're just not communicating. There's a lot of communication that happens in the silence, and I hope that this is not the case. Sometimes silence is aggression. And we have to be honest about that. Silence is, I'm not going to give you the benefit of a relationship, of a conversation.
right.
I'm gonna be silent because that's the one thing that you care about. So I won't talk to you. I won't give you the benefit of a conversation. But what I would say is really paying attention. I mean, safety is important. If the person has been, maybe they've been attacked, maybe they feel like they don't have anything to say. Maybe
Mhm.
maybe the person is so intelligent that they're intimidated, and so they don't feel like there's anything that they could say. So just being mindful of that, so that you guys could kind of feel on equal playing fields. And again, like I said, the communication is happening. You just have to pay attention to how and where that is
Yeah.
happening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cook. Do you have any last words for anyone that's watching? Adana, do you have any last words for anyone that's watching?
Well, I think just to summarize what I have been hearing and what I'd like to convey is love, trust, and commitment are just
Yeah.
foundational for any relationship that we have. You know,
Yes.
showing love to our kids, instilling in them safety so that they can trust, and just being committed to stay in there, thick
Yeah.
and thin, good and bad. That creates a healthy child, and that creates a healthy adult who can have a healthy relationship.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I encourage people to reach out if you want to learn how to be healthy so that you can be in a healthy relationship.
Yes. Adana, do you have any last words? Oh, your mic is on mute. Can you unmute yourself? Hold on, we can't hear you. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah. I'm hoping, like I said, I'm hoping tonight that the awareness and the information that people have gotten to tonight will trigger an awareness. So the next time, like with Jamal, when you meet a man and you learn more about what men think, and Dr. Cook, you learn more about the issues of trauma, and you learn with me interventions. Hopefully, it will trigger you to build a healthy relationship, because it really is possible
Yes.
if you do the
Yes.
work.
Roz, do you have anything to share?
I just want to say that this has been wonderful, very much needed, especially as we close out the new year, um, talking about relationships, because we have to have them, in the light of what's going on right now in the world, with people's health. And like I always tell my clients, a healthy relationship is just one entity, but it's one part that's going to make the whole body whole. And as people work towards their healthier lifestyle. So this has been amazing. I can't wait until part 2
Two.
of relationship. Yeah, part 2. I love it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you have anything else to add tonight? I know when we get to part 2, you may have some more to add, because Melissa was just like, she wishes we had more time to dive more so into the topics, that we're unpacking tonight, because I think that's why we split it up into all of these parts, because we cannot speak on the essence of like everything in just one setting. So Melissa, stay tuned for part 2. So Jamal, do you have any last words?
I mean, I don't want to be cliche, but men are human beings too. I think that's important that we remember that they're not the villain. They want to be loved. The love that you want, they want the same thing. The acceptance that you want, they want the same thing. I think that's important to really look at that person as that. And all too often during this pandemic, I've heard of many couples breaking up and separating. It's important that we really work at this thing that we call love and relationships with one another.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we all just want to thank everyone who has been watching, and we just really pray and hope that this has not only been informative for you, but it has encouraged you to work on, yourself, as long as, along with your relationships and friendships with others, especially during this time where a lot of us, some people may just be home, they're not able to work, and you're just with your partner. Even if you are able to, work outside of the home right now, we just pray and hope that you received, something from one of our, panels and our clinicians and panelists and our clinicians. So we just want to say thank you again, and stay tuned for part 2. And on part 2, Dr. Cook, do you want to just give everyone like just a brief, blurb on what we'll be talking about in part 2?
Well, in part 2, we'll be looking specifically at parent-child relationships. So we'll be, talking about the context of the family, how to have healthy relationships with kids, and how parents can learn how to raise healthy kids. So that's the gist of what we'll be looking at in part 2.
Yes. So again, I have been your moderator tonight, Candace Wrights. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Trauma, Pain, and Relationships Part 1. Stay tuned as we'll give out information on the date and time for Part 2. So thank you for joining us on Part 1 on tonight. Thank you all, and have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Night.